Today's podcast is presented by Podgo. Podgo is the easiest way for you to monetize your podcast, providing podcasters with a flat rate for ad space so you always know how much you get when you include an ad from Podgo. I recently joined as a member, and you can too. Apply today to become a member and immediately be connected with advertisers that fit your audience. That's podgo.co at podgo.co. And when you go to apply and they ask you, how did you hear about Podgo? Make sure you tell them that the Vault Classic Music Review sent you.
Excited for a road trip? Start it off right with auto coverage from American Family Insurance. J.D. Power ranked us number 1 in customer satisfaction with the auto insurance shopping experience among mid-size insurers. Get a quote at amfam.com.
American Family Insurance.
For J.D. Power 2021 award information, visit jdpower.com/awards. American Family Mutual Insurance Company, S.I. and its operating companies, 6000 American Parkway, Madison, Wisconsin.
Welcome to the Vault Podcast, classic music reviews, presented by IV Creative. Now, here's your hosts, B. Cox and the crew.
Greetings and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Vault Podcast, classic music reviews. Presented by IV Creative, it's a perspective of the classics from a fresh point of view. We appreciate you for taking your time and lending your ears to our perspective. You could be anywhere listening to anything, but you're right here with us, so we thank you. With you today is yours truly, B. Cox, and with me I have my boy in the place to be, J.O., here joining me on this glorious afternoon here in the DMV and, of course, across the interwebs, connected here on the Vault Classic Music Reviews. Shout out to everybody who is joining us as well and listening in from stateside and worldwide. I want to thank y'all for continuing to give the show love and support. Like we said, we got a big last quarter of the year to come out, and we got some action-packed albums we're going to be reviewing and also some action-packed segments we have coming up. So continue to show the love. Always make sure you're connecting with us on social media, reaching out to us, let us know what you think, hitting us in the inbox. We always love, of course, because we do it here all for you. And like we always say here on the Vault, our motto is hashtag open the vault, hashtag nothing but the classics. And Jay, well, we always like to cover albums here on the Vault that we say have some sort of impact. You know, it's the reason why we call it. It's classic music review. And in the hip hop genre, you come across certain albums and some have a little bit more of an impact than others. And this album in particular that we're going to cover today is an album that had an impact for a lot of different reasons, good and bad, if you look at it, especially from that perspective at the time that it came out. So we're going to go back 30 years ago. And we are going to go back to 30 years ago to October 31st, 1991 on Halloween and take a look at the second album of Ice Cube, the controversial yet classic Death Certificate, released on Lynch Mob and Priority Records with a runtime of 61 minutes and 8 seconds. Recorded mostly in 1991, and it was a busy year for Cube. During that year, Cube, formerly in NWA, then turned solo after the classic album Straight Outta Compton, and this was his second album after his classic debut, America's Most Wanted. Producers on this, production mostly handled by Sir Jinx, some also by DJ Pooh, and also production by Ice Cube. Now, this album came out in 1991, and Jay, you know, at this point, Cube was very busy after Straight Outta Compton. He left, obviously, because there were disputes about the group and about equal pay and about treatment and things of that nature. Plus, Cube was a star that even with NWA was starting to expand beyond just the reach of the group because of what he did. He was the lead rapper. He wrote for many people on the group who didn't have the writing prowess like he had. His pen game definitely was pivotal towards NWA becoming the group that it did. And he needed to be basically branch out on his own. So as he does that, he releases America's Most Wanted in 1990. And as 1991 starts, he starts to record Death Certificate. But this wasn't the only thing he was doing, though, Jay. He was also involved with other things, involved with music. He had a label. He was involved with Yo-Yo and her debut album, Make Way for the Mother Lode. Also involved with his younger cousin, none other than Dale the Funky Homosapien, and his album, I Wish My Brother George Was Here. And on top of all of that, as I was telling you before we came on and talked, Jay, before I came down for us to record this on BET was playing none other than Boyz In the Hood, which he starred in, and also co-starred with Cuba Gooding Jr. and Lawrence Fishburne, which was a huge hit, a movie that has turned 30 years old as of this year as well. So he had a lot going on while he was recording this album. Then to also further change things up, during the first album with America's Most Wanted, he had production by the Bomb Squad. You know, he went to New York and worked with the Bomb Squad, who did production with Public Enemy. He worked a lot with Chuck D and the Bomb Squad. You know, they talked about how they went to the record warehouse in Long Island and pulled tons and crates of records to really create that sonic wall of sound that you heard a lot as well on the third album, Fear of a Black Planet by Public Enemy, and you heard that sound. This was a little bit different, though, because this was mostly produced by Jinx. And you could start to hear when you listen to the production here how different it was, and then how evolved the sound was starting to become. As you had mentioned, it started to really get that West Coast sound, that West Coast like G-Funk sound started to be defined and was really starting to take shape around this time. And not only that, Cube himself personally had, you know, made a conversion over to Islam. And you can tell with some of the stuff he had been involved in from when he left NWA to now that his content and his music also changed a lot too. So this really was an explosive album when it came out. But, you know, I'm going to go ahead and get into it with you because I know you're a hip hop head, but I know that you love hip hop from the West Coast. So, of course, man, Ice Cube's Death Certificate, 30 years old this year. Amazing sophomore album. When you talk about sophomore albums, a lot of people put this at the top of the list. When you say who's had the best sophomore album, this is right here in the short list. So I'll go to you, man. Your thoughts on this album by Ice Cube, Death Certificate. Tell me what it is. Tell me how you felt the first time that you listened to it. And then since then, its legacy, how it's changed to you, and then listening to it recently, how do you think that its legacy has stood up?
Yeah, for sure. So like, you know what I'm saying? Like back then, of course, like 91, I think I just turned 10 years old, but at the same time, you know, with Cube, like his focus mostly being on like, for lack of a better term, like Black Power and things like that, like more like socially conscious music. Like I guess I was in a privileged position, like, you know what I'm saying, like, you know, having relatives, stuff like that really was teaching me about Black history, Black Power and everything like that. So then when Cube came along with this, it was like, oh, you know what I'm saying? It's like kind of like coinciding with what they were talking about, albeit not, and the thing about it wasn't corny, you know what I'm saying? Like, you had people that could do those type of records that would sound like whack or whatever, but like not with Cube, like
not at all.
Cube he didn't hold back at all, you know what I'm saying? Like back then, but of course, I can only grasp so much of that concept at like, you know, being 10 years old, but moving on up to now, like, I mean, it's like, to me, it's aged like fine wine, especially with the lyrical content.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like it's a double-edged sword. I mean, it's kind of a good thing and a bad thing. Like, yeah, like you could look back on this to pull like strength as far as like being your best self, as far as like particularly a Black man in America and realizing what the issues are to be faced and everything like that. But it's kind of sad at the same time, like, dang, these issues are still here, still prevalent even 30 years later.
Tell me about it.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
Matter of fact, it makes you even think, because I mean, like, again, like 1991, like going back to that, like this is like right after the whole Rodney King tape came out.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So like, so for this almost like to be the soundtrack to that, and then with Boyz In the Hood, like, you know what I'm saying? It was like, I don't want to say it was like it was a reason that LA riots happened, but like, you know, it was like that, it led to that spirit of like, you know, Black folks being, in particular, being fed up, you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. And he was, I think it was like on the Predator joint, not to skip ahead to his other album, but like, he was like, anything you wanted me to prophesize about, it's like, just go back to my Ice Cube library and pick a record. And sure enough, that was the case with this.
Tell me about it. Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing, man. Well, first, before I even get like into that part of it, to speak on what you just said, you said some really interesting things just now. Speak about a rapper that you think about has a 3-album run for their first 3 albums than Ice Cube with America's Most Wanted, Death Certificate, and The Predator. I mean, that's about as impressive as the 3 first LP run as you can have as an MC. Absolutely. You know, and just each of them have a value proposition in regards to the message that resides in each one of those albums. But it's crazy to think about that now we're in 2021. This is in 1991. As you said, March 1991, Rodney King gets attacked by the police and is arrested. That eventually sees the light of day. In 1991, Latasha Hollins gets killed by a Korea store owner in March, not even 2 weeks after Rodney King.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
You know,
and which was straight up murder, by the way, if you saw that tape.
Oh, it's 100% murder. And all this happening in LA, right in the view and in the consciousness of Ice Cube as he's going through this. And the one thing that I have to say about Ice Cube is that the short-sightedness, I would have to say, of the media. Now, one thing about it is that I think that any Ice Cube or any other gangster rapper back there rightly earned the criticism for the things that they said in their music about women, about drug dealing and things like that. The women part of it, I think, is the part that I think that they do deserve the criticism of, because a lot of that's wrong. We know that. But I think they were all products of their environment and what they were experiencing. The things that they were speaking about were things that they were experiencing and things that people that they knew experienced. So this is the vein in which this album gets made. It's made in the vein where police brutality is an issue, where blacks are killed for the perception that we're doing the wrong thing, and therefore they feel as though they have to eliminate us. So that's really where you get the energy of this album sort of coming from, in addition to all the ratchet shit that they talk about in this album too. And that's where we talk the differences, like the death side and the life side. Like when I first heard this album, I heard it on cassette tape. So you got that death side and that life side. The death side is pretty much all the bad stuff that people want to talk about. It's about talking about things in the hood, things about drug dealing, things about women, and stuff about STDs and violence and all that stuff you want to talk about. The life side is a little bit more socially conscious, and it's talking about the issues. And that, to me, was the side that you could talk about. Both of those sides have relevance as far as what's going on today. But the life side, more so than anything else, is like, damn, yo, 30 years forward. And we talk about this with a few albums, but really 30 years forward, and here's where we are. You know what I mean? So what I would say when I first listened to this album, first of all, this was an album. It was one of those albums that you could sort of sneak to listen at home. This is an album I had to go listen to over at my homeboy's house, you know, because I wasn't listening to this at home. Even with the headphones on, I wasn't listening to it at home. This was a tape that I didn't dare to bring inside my household at 9 years old. Like, when I first heard this album, when I finally turned 10, I was at my homeboy's house listening to it because his parents were a little bit younger. They were sort of into rap and things like that. So that's how I listened to it. Blown away, obviously, because we all know Cube had skills, but it seemed like he was coming for next on this one. And even back then, when I was, 9, 10 years old, I'm like, yo, Cube is really after people now. I mean, even beyond not even just getting to know Vaseline, which is the last track on this joint, but he seemed like he was with a purpose. I'm listening to it later. Obviously, I visited this a lot more the older that I got, and then now as a full-blown adult, like, I'm blown away, of course, by the lyrical content, blown away by the messages that are in here, and then furthermore, the production, like to go from the Bomb Squad to then go to Jinx. And for Jinx to be able to put together a production on this where they use records, and I don't know if you noticed this, but on the production of this, there's probably a couple of records that were sampled like 3 or 4 different times. I remember reading something. Somebody said that actually George Clinton and Funkadelic's Atomic Dog, they sampled that record, I want to say, and I think 10 different records in this song. So they took different elements from that one song and used it in 10 songs in here. That's crazy, ain't it? That's wild stuff. That's like production mastery, to be able to take that and be able to disguise it so well that you can't tell that it came from a song that you may have heard earlier, a sample that you heard earlier.
I thought Madlib was dope with that, man.
Yeah,
Jinx do like way early. It's like,
yeah,
shit.
I know it's crazy, man. But just really blown away by the sound. I felt as though, like on America's Most Wanted, I feel as though solo wise he was still trying to find his way, and he did a pretty good job with that. But I think with this, man, he really took, as they say, the tiger by the throat, and he went for it. You know what I mean? And also, shout out, of course, to Boogiemen. They did, Boogiemen producing on this is too. A lot of tracks on here. Summer Vacation, Steady Mobbing, Giving Up the Naggy Duck Out. So not just Jinx on this, Boogiemen as well. Got to definitely give their props as well. But it's an album that when we talk about, depending on who you talk to, people will either love or hate it, but the majority of hip-hop heads love it. People, obviously, there was a lot of controversial things about this. This is where the things about, obviously the things that came up in No Vaseline and in Black Korea And then people will always talk about that, was homophobic and anti-Semitic and all the different other things that Cube had going against him during that time. But I think for us in our generation, the message was the most important thing. So now we're going to get just into highlights, man. So Jay, give me some of your highlights here on Death Certificate and any lowlights if you have them at all as well.
Yeah, for sure. So highlights for me would be Steady Mobbing. For me, A Bird in the Hand, because like that was what I mean. Because like I don't know if you recall that joint playing in Boyz in the Hood, like when Ferguson was put up on Trey and like cocked that shotgun in his face.
Yep, I
they
remember
was bumping that joint. So
Yeah.
I was in this shop. Oh shit, sound dope as hell. Like
right, yeah.
So for that to be on here, it was a pleasant surprise. Other highlights, I have to say, it's kind of a 1-2 punch. Even though it's on the death side, would have to be giving up the nappy dugout and then Look Who's Burning.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Because I'm gonna tell you, like, reason being because like those two, it's like a 1-2 punch. That's probably like the best like sex ed joint you could probably put out there to play to like really educate them about like what's gonna happen if you mess with chicks that's for the streets. You know what I mean? Like of course I'm giving up the nappy dugout. You know what I'm saying? You mess with chick, you find out. You know what I'm saying? She ran through about half the hood. Right. And then Look Who's Burning is for, of course, like what the end result of that could be. So like that. That wipes out the effectiveness of pretty much like, and I know I'm showing my age by using this term, like every after school special we probably watched like growing up as far as like STDs and shit. Right. No, matter of fact, it even made me think about like, remember the joint, it's almost like the B side, the dirty side to like the joint, Let's Talk About Sex, the whole Salt and Pepper joint. It's almost like a B side of that, but like this is like the more
explicit
gutter side of it, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Yeah.
It just made me think about like, oh, this was around during that time. Like, I'm like, oh shit. Like, of course, no Vaseline, which apparently they had to add to the joint later. It didn't come out with the initial release of the album.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Just like for the fact it was so impactful as far as disc records. Like, there was always disc records in hip hop, but like, no Vaseline, I think, was that pivotal point as far as like raising the bar as far as how venomous disc records could be.
Oh, goodness gracious.
You know what I mean? Like, like almost, I put it like this: like, no Vaseline had to cross that hit him up could walk. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yes. No Vaseline. Oh goodness, yeah, just classic.
It makes me think about like, what was y'all thinking dissing this man? Like, because like, of course, like this is like around the same time that Niggas for Life came out, and you look at the contrast between those two albums, like this and like that one, they was more so focused on that gangster shit, and Cuban in this direction. So then for them, I think they just more with 100 miles and running, right?
Yeah, 100 miles and running. Yeah.
So then for him not to say nothing on America's Most, he had to come back with this, like, But it's like you dissing somebody that pretty much wrote for everybody in the group, with the exception of probably like MC Ren. Yeah. So it's almost like you biting the hand that's feeding you. You know what I'm saying? So like that just wasn't a smart decision, and even Yella had to admit, like, hey man, Cube got us. So like,
yeah, they knew.
Yeah, that just shows how impactful that record was.
Yeah. It definitely was something that ruffled some feathers, and it wasn't just NWA's feathers. This got the attention of groups like the ADL and other folks, like groups and people who were saying that it was hate speech and stuff like that. So it caused a lot of ruffled feathers for the fact that it was a diss track. You know what I'm saying? Really targeted at NWA and also their manager. So yeah. Any other highlights?
The other one I was gonna say was Alive on Arrival too. Like I like how you did with that, Jane, as far as like exposing like the stuff black folks have to go through, like hospitals and lower end communities, and
tell me about it.
Even when you're the victim of like violence or something like that, they want to press you about shit that quite frankly doesn't matter. Like when you're in a life or death situation.
Yeah, that struck me, man. Especially he talking about the whole thing about the bullet traveling through his body, and they asking him questions, handcuffed to the bed. Oh man, that hit me. And I just remembered like how gripping that was, even when I was like 9-10 years old. When I listened to it when I was later, I was like, damn, that's tough. That's really, really tough. Highlights. So off the break, The Wrong Nigga to Fuck With, the way it comes in off of the intro, just sets the tone for the album for me. I mean, it just completely says, there's one thing I have to give Cube his credit for. He's one of the best niggas at, especially during that particular era, Like them early 90s coming in and grabbing your attention off the first couple of bars just because of his voice and the bars that he spits that comes out. Craziness. My Summer Vacation, just another example of Q being able to tell stories and telling a story about taking his operations out east over to St. Louis and them taking over niggas' blocks and being able to make money, and then them niggas getting mad and basically figuring out they wanted their corners back. And then really, I think to me, it mirrored what was happening in the country around that time, because we always kind of thought like these West Coast gangs were sort of like being West Coast, like the Crips and the Bloods. We all thought that was a California thing. But, you know, they started expanding out, especially, I don't know, really remember, but like in the 90s, it seemed like it was starting to move further east. So when they were giving that little fake news report talking about some stuff in East St. Louis and Michigan and Oklahoma and Texas, I remember that like right around the same time that niggas started seeing Crips and Bloods like in New York and also in DC and all these other places where you wasn't expecting Crips and Bloods to be at. All these different other Crip and Blood sets popping up all over the country. So I thought it was interesting that he chose that song to where niggas were pretty much where the West Coast was starting to expand their operations east. And as they went east, the gang shit came with them.
Almost 90% of women have cellulite. And guess what? It's not their fault. We don't choose cellulite, but we can choose a different way to treat it. Meet Quo, collagenase Clostridium histolyticum, AAES, the first and only FDA-approved prescription injectable for moderate to severe cellulite in the buttocks of adult women. This non-surgical treatment is injected by an aesthetic specialist in 10 minutes or less. Individual results may vary. Do not receive if you are allergic to any collagenase or ingredients in Quo or have an infection at the treatment site. May cause serious side effects, allergic reactions including anaphylaxis, and injection site bruising. Seek medical help right away for any signs of allergic hypersensitivity. Tell your doctor about all your medical conditions if you have a bleeding condition or take medicine that prevents clotting. Most common side effects include bruising, pain, hardness, itching, redness, discoloration, swelling, and warmth at the injection site. Ask your doctor about all possible side effects and for product information. If you're ready to get to the bottom of your cellulite, learn more and find a specialist at Quo.com.
Steady Mobbin', obviously, great track, another classic Ice Cube track. Gotta agree with you there on that giving up the nappy dugout and look at who's burning, like perfect back-to-back sort of thing to talk about, you know, little girl went to Catholic school, private school, now she's a slut, you know, this is what she's doing, you know, she's doing this or whatever whenever things happen, you know, and now you dig into the look who's burning, all the things about the different type of things that happened when you fuck around in the hood, and as they say, you don't wear Jimmy hats. This is what happens, you know. And my man going into the clinic talk about he there for a physical, you know, quotation mark. He's there for a physical, and you're not there for no physical, nigga. You there to go get treated for some shit some broad gave you. What the fuck you getting treated for? Right. You know, a bird in the hand. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's just really the comparison between working a regular job to him going to get drugs to be able to make it so that he can really eat. Just a story that a lot of kids go through, especially growing up in the hood. It's about going and making honest money versus what you can make on the street. If you can make in a day what you can make in a month, why wouldn't you do it? Alive on Arrival, really gripping story. The whole thing about the bullet, like I'm sitting there thinking about like what's going through his head and that the feeling of what it may feel like a bullet actually traveling through your body as you're wanting to get care while you're getting questioned and, you know, people asking you to fill out forms and you're sitting in the waiting room with a bunch of people who've been through shit just like you, all gunshot wound victims. And, you know, that sort of takes me back to remember what it was like in the city, Jay, when we were growing up, like those days in 1991 where, you know, you turn around and the daggone emergency rooms, especially in places like Southeast and the Uptown, were filled with people who were gunshot wound victims, man. So on the other side, I thought that Black Korea, and he got a lot of, you know, backlash because, you know, this came right on the heels of Latasha Hollins, and supposedly, you know, he got criticism from this stating that as the riots were coming on that he helped to stem some anti-Asian, you know, sentiment in the hood. But I mean, to me, as far as I understand, that sentiment was always there because there's been tensions between the Asians, Koreans, and the blacks, especially in that part of the country. True to the game, the first diss track on this, as you will. 3 verses of Venom, not as colorful as No Vaseline, but he definitely gets it in on this. I mean, you know, he's talking about, at least on one verse in this, who he's talking about. Now, I do see someone was saying that he was referencing MC Hammer in at least one of those verses. which to me is crazy because I don't know how he would actually sit there and talk stuff about Hammer, and maybe he was talking about Hammer and Hammer didn't know he was talking about him, because obviously we both done heard stories about Hammer and what he can do to people. You know what I mean? So at least back in the day. Doing dumb shit was another one, because it talks about the little dumb shit you used to do back in the day. You know what I mean? And so that gives you a window into, you being young, dumb, as he said, young, dumb, or full of cum, doing dumb shit. Underrated on this album is Us, because I feel like where we are today and what we're going through as black people, he points out some really interesting facts on here, talking about how the drug lords and, they make money and sell crack and do stuff like that, and they don't, y'all could have built us a grocery store, but instead y'all buying each other, buying clothes and chains and shit like that, we should be using that money to get ourselves further. And then he sort of talk about the whole thing about, black people. Black people always want to look good and want to stunt, but don't want to get anywhere economically. So those are one of the messages in the songs where you talk about we need to get further as a people, but we can't get that way doing the things that we've done, and we're not in the notable quotables yet, but he said stuff like this. He said, us po niggas, nappy hair, big lips, 4 or 5 babies on your crotch, and you expecting Uncle Sam to help us out. Like you say, we ain't nothing but no porch monkeys to the average bigot, redneck honky. You say coming up is a must, but before we can come up, take a look at us. Just another genius of what Cube does when it comes to that social commentary. And then No Vaseline, bro. I mean, it's, to me, it's in the top 3 of diss tracks all time. If you ask most people, they'll put it at number 1. And I wouldn't have any argument in saying that, it's number 1. Why? Because he came out of the box and straight destroyed everybody from NWA and also destroyed Jerry Heller. And I feel like he had a lot of venom on that track. I mean, he had a little bit of smoke for Dre, but I feel like a lot of his venom was for Easy, was for Ren, and was for Jerry Heller. But in particular, he had a lot of smoke for Ren. And I feel like that was sort of the MC in him, because he knew Ren was a rapper and Ren wrote. And he was like, nah, y'all, I got something for you. Like, for real, I got something for you. Let me show you how this shit is done. And obviously, Easy, yeah, he had shit for Easy. And the well-documented problems before Easy died. And then the shit with Jerry Heller, like, yeah. Yeah, like, obviously, right. But that is a gold standard of diss tracks. It's something that when I hear that sample, I can't, even when I hear the original, I can't do any but hear No Vaseline when I hear it. You know what I mean?
And that's a further testament of how powerful the train was. So,
oh man. But just no really low lights on this for me, man. I think that it flowed really well, having the 2 sides from when you had the cassette, and even when you listen to it, when you're either streaming or hear the CD, it just flows, man. And the production on this, man, to be able to hear that different sound, the work that Boogiemen and Sir Jinx did on this, bro, it just it took such a contrast from America's Most Wanted, but it still worked. It definitely still worked. Cool. So now we're going to get into notable quotables. So, Jay, you got a notable quotable in here for us to talk about?
I actually got 2. I mean,
cool.
And no surprise, the first one was like from Look Who's Burning.
Okay.
On the second verse, like, now everybody's a victim. You can go see him, and you hear more claps in the Coliseum. Sitting there quiet and embarrassed. Whoop, there goes that bitch who was careless. I remember she wouldn't give the cock to anybody who lived on the block. Now, ho, look what you got. Bend that big ass over for that shot. Because somebody's pipe hot, dripping like a faucet. I'm glad I didn't toss it. Got you a college boy who was worse than me. And he probably fucked the whole university. Still want him to dick you down, kick you down with some bucks. Now who got fucked? With a nigga for the money he's earning. But ask for some more, the bitch, look who's burning.
Yeah.
Like.
Yeah. This shit definitely.
I'm sure it's from another one we can all relate to. Like, Lil Young acting all high sedity, but then. Yeah, because you ain't on a certain level, but then go mess with somebody she perceives to be on her level, then she gets done worse.
Exactly. Right.
What was that I was looking at? I don't think I mentioned it, but Man's Best Friend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And in verse 2, he's like, here's the reason why Ice Cube packed, just in case little punks try to jack. I can't put a motherfucking pit bull under a coat in the small of my back. So I got to take my Beretta, and I bet you it'll probably work 100% better because it'll keep me out of danger with 16 in the clip and 1 in the chamber. So this goes all y'all intruders, beware of the owner, because the owner is a shooter. I don't just want to give your ass rabies. I'd rather have your ass pushing up daisies.
Yeah.
And I can't do that with Benji, Rented, 10, or Spuzz McKenzie. Forget about a dog who hit the shit in the den. Nowadays, a gat is a man's best friend.
Yeah. That was another standout I didn't mention, though, but the parallel between dogs and guns, very cleverly done. Very cleverly done. So my notable quotable, and it's a ton of them on here. I could have picked something from No Vaseline, but I decided to pick Us, as I just mentioned. So this is the one actually I was referring to, was verse 2. And he said, and all y'all dope dealers, you're as bad as the police because you kill us. You got rich when you started slanging dope, but you ain't built us a supermarket, so when can we spend our money with the blacks? Too busy buying gold and Cadillacs. That's what you're doing with the money that you're raising. Exploiting us just like the Caucasians did for 400 years. I got 400 tears for 400 peers. Died last year from gang-related crimes. That's why I got gang-related rhymes. But when I do a show, kick some facts, us blacks don't know how to act. Sometimes I believe I'm the hype man. Boy, we're messing up ourselves, blame the white man. But don't point the finger, you jigaboo. Take a look at yourself, you dumb nigga, you. Pretty soon, hip-hop won't be so nice. No Ice Cube, just Vanilla Ice. And y'all sit and scream and cuss. But there's no one to blame but us. And I mean, interesting, man. You know, he talked about the whole thing. You know, the dope dealers just as bad as the police because they're killing us, but killing us a different way. They got rich because they started slanging dope, but they ain't built us a supermarket yet with all the money that they had, you know? Instead, they too busy buying golden Cadillacs. And yeah,
for those that's younger than us, this is like 91 when like, this is like the height of the crack epidemic at this point.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Even go back to DC, that was like the bloodiest shit on record for us, but 91 was just like just under like 500 murders.
Yeah, that like end of 90 to beginning and the end of 90 into 91 was the deadliest year on record in DC. You want to talk about some pretty much on average at one point in time, like 1.5 murders happened every day. You know, that's how bad it was. And in cities like LA and cities like New York and cities like, you know, Houston and all over, and where there were black people in America, it was like this. You know what I mean? For those who weren't alive during that particular time, I remember I was young, but I could remember just seeing the news reports, and it felt like every day on the news it was like 2 or 3 people showing up dead in DC. And then neighboring Prince George's County where we grew up at, it wasn't that much different, you know? So, I mean,
Not at all.
yeah. So, I mean, yeah, though it does make sense. It made me sort of think like, damn, man. So you're right, man. All these folks who were out here, like dope dealers who were making so much money, instead of them like maybe even coming together to being like, yo, let's go ahead and make the hood better. Let's build a supermarket, like help fix up a playground, help do this, help do that. But nah, everybody was at each other's neck trying to get money. You know what I'm saying? And spending it on them by themselves. So I give Cube props for him coming out at the height of this drug shit when it was really bad, for him calling out these dope dealers. You know what I mean? I definitely do. I give him props for doing that. So just part of the social commentary thing about Cube during this time, that everybody, it wasn't just all bitches and hoes. It was some shit that, you know, he was talking some shit on here. He definitely was. So now we're here, Jay, at the final test, the test of time to see where we are. Is it a certified classic, borderline classic, classic just in its time, or not a classic at all? And then from 7 to 10, how we feel about it. So I have a feeling what you're going to say, but what say you on what kind of classic it is and your rating and why?
Oh, definitely classic, and I'm going 9 out of 10 with this joint.
Cool.
Like, you know what I'm saying? I mean, now one could make the argument that the beats may sound a little bit dated, the production, everything like that, but of course we got to keep in mind this was back in 91.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But Cube's lyrics, I mean, they're just so poignant and just stand out so much. I mean, honestly, I feel it overshadows that. So
Yeah.
and again, it's just like a double-edged sword. I mean, it's just remarkable. It's still relevant, but still sad at the same time. Like, I mean, even the stuff that's happened in the past, 2 years, maybe with George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, like, it's just still relevant.
Yeah,
It's
is.
unfortunate, but I mean, it's remarkable for him, like, to be able to call it, but at the same time, it's like I said, it's still sad, like, you know, it still could be used to this day as far as, like, you know, pumping us up to, like, wanting to make changes.
Yeah.
That it's sad that still something has to be changed, you know what I mean?
Yeah. this is an album that, to me, when you talk about best albums of all time, and if you're putting it together the list, if it's like top 20 all time, depending on who you task, it's top 10 all time. Again, for me, certified classic, 10 out of 10, without a shadow of a doubt. This is one of the most impactful albums of our time. And by our time, I'm talking about the time when me and Jay has been alive. It's an album that has sparked controversy. It's an album that also sparked some thought-provoking, some thought-provoking times. It definitely raises the issues of the time. It speaks to an America that hasn't changed that much in 30 years. I mean, the technology has advanced. The cars do different things. Our phones are like supercomputers. Jay and I can record a podcast and be miles away from each other. Like, all this stuff can happen. But still, there are things in America and around the world that people deal with when it comes to injustice, as far as inequity and all these other things that are happening. And Cube was singing this 30 years ago. And despite all the other rhetoric about the bad things people want to talk about, whether he's talking about women or drug dealing or violence, it's through a scope of an America that he saw and he was reporting from the front lines of. It's something that when you talk about art imitating life, yeah, this is it in its purest form from a hip hop perspective. And it's an album that when you talk about like the best of all time, a lot of people have this on their short list for the best, like in their top 20 or top 10. Cube is an MC that definitely makes a lot of people's short list for top 20 or top 10 of all time. And the argument is a valid argument considering what his body of work was, especially his early body of work. So certified classic, 10 out of 10. Jay said certified classic, 9 out of 10. I definitely think that it's on the short list of some of the most important rap albums in history because of the messaging in this as well. And then, production-wise, I mean, I could agree with you a little bit there, Jay, but I kind of feel like that the production fit what the times were becoming because we talked about what West Coast production was as it was starting to gain an identity. There were producers like Dre, like DJ Quick, like Jinx, like Boogiemen, like Battle Cat, like DJ Pooh that were starting to create what the identity would be. By the time we got into the next year after this album, the West Coast sound was almost fully defined. And it started to travel up the coast to Oakland and would sort of integrate into what the things that they were doing there. And before you knew it, the damn country was in a G-Funk haze. Like from 92 probably up until about 94. So, yeah. Definitely dope times and a dope album. So there we go, boys and girls. Ice Cube Death Certificate. Make sure y'all go check it out. There's already been a 25th anniversary version that came out on vinyl and also on digitally. Make sure y'all go check out those deluxe versions. Also, please make sure you go and check out some of those articles about the 30th anniversary for that as it comes out. It's, again, man, an album that we can't state just how dope it is and how important it is as well. And that
just made me think about like what you were saying. It made me think about what you were saying as far as like times change. I mean, the one good thing that's come out of the time change is like like smartphones and camera phones, things like that.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean? Because like now, like all those things we said were going on back there, you can actually see it in almost real time now. Like the fact that the Rodney King thing was caught on camera was a miracle in itself. You know what I mean? Like it really showed like, look, this is what's going on.
Yeah.
But I even said like somebody else the other day, like, can you imagine if you took like a smartphone and went back there and like recorded some of the stuff you would have seen?
Yeah, ridiculous.
Extremely bad shit.
Extremely bad shit because I think things were going on then and they didn't know that there was like those cops who were beating up Rodney King had no idea that somebody was like, a quarter of a mile away recording them. They had no idea that was going on. You could tell they was beating them like they didn't know they were being recorded. So like now it's like they know there's a chance they can be recorded and but still
some still don't give a fuck.
Some still don't give a fuck. They still doing it. Exactly. Yeah, man. Good point. Very, very good point. That is one of the good things about today is that we have the ability to be able to capture things in the act as it is happening, as you said, in real time. And that is going to wrap up yet another edition of The Vault. Please make sure you are checking us out on our host on Red Circle. You can also download, stream, and subscribe to The Vault Classic Music Reviews on any one of our streaming sources, anywhere where podcasts can be found. If you go to the link tree in the bio of any one of our social media pages, you'll find our link tree there with all of our streaming sources and also all of our social media pages. Again, you can follow The Vault Classic Music Reviews on Instagram on @VaultCMR Podcast, on Twitter @Vault Classic, and on Facebook and YouTube, you can follow the Vault Classic Music Reviews podcast, like the Facebook page, subscribe to the YouTube channel, interact with us on social media. We do it here all for you. We appreciate the support, and if you have a friend, tell a friend, and make sure that that friend tells a friend. Always remember to keep your headphones on and your music loud, but not too loud. And as we close, we like to remind everyone to dream big, because dreams are the basis for creation. Always create, motivate, and elevate, because we were never destined or created to stay stationary in this life. And on that note, we say peace.
Thank you for listening and coming into The Vault. Please subscribe and follow us on Facebook at IV Creative and Instagram at IVECRE8.